Hello and welcome back to Processing the Process, where we capture and discuss the technical, psychological, and contextual dynamics that shape the process of creating a work of art. Week by week, moment by moment, we are following Jonathan Riddell, choreographer and artistic director of Riddell Dance Theater, as he creates his latest works for RDT's Second Story Dance project and delves into new creative territory. And in fact, it is that new creative territory that we are going to muck around in today. Now, while Jon's on hiatus, I should put that in quotes, from Second Story during the summer, and his kids are in camp for at least half a day for most of the summer, Jon has talked about really trying to use the time that they're away to focus on his creative endeavors. And Jon, you have told me that you have recommitted to getting in and staying in top physical condition.
Yes.
And I'm very impressed with the organized way that you have set up everything to achieve it. So to ensure that it doesn't fall through the cracks, Jon is now using a timer and an alarm to set while he's working that reminds him, oh, it's time to work out. So as I was thinking about this and thinking about the concept of time, I was reminded of the many, many conversations, Jon, that you and I have had over probably the last couple of years, really. These philosophical discussions about how you feel you should use your time as a creator. And I've really noticed an evolution in your thinking, particularly in the last few months, that I wanted to take some time today and share with our colleagues. So for a long time, Jon really felt as if he should focus on a single creative endeavor rather than dividing his time among several. And Jon, you would tell me that you thought that engaging in multiple creative endeavors would wind up narrowing the amount of time that you could spend in any one, and that would likely result, or at least limit, what you could accomplish in that area and ultimately what kind of and what degree of success you could achieve. However, a new way of thinking is beginning to emerge about these dynamics, and that is growth. That is that other pursuits that feed Jon's mind and body and creative soul actually facilitate the work on his main creative pursuit. So here's an interesting example that occurred on Wednesday, July 11th. Jon really wanted to work on his music for the 3-hour period that his kids were going to be at camp. And he wanted to stay grounded in that authentic inclination. But he also said to himself, hey, I better move, because if I don't, physically I will feel uncomfortable and mentally I will be irritable, and that's not so good. So he decided that he would begin by working on his music, because that's what he wanted to do most of all, and set his trusty timer to go off at 1 hour after he had begun working on one of his pursuits. And wow, how disciplined were you? You got up and you went to your treadmill. Now, lo and behold, Jonathan discovers that his engagement in physical exercise actually stimulates the generation of creative ideas. So much so that, picture this, here's Jon on the treadmill, and he's generating idea after idea, and he can't wait to write them down. So literally, he grabs his phone, and as he's running on the treadmill, he's trying to jot down notes on his phone.
I don't recommend it. It's dangerous, but yeah.
Do not try this at home. But it really shows us, how creative this period of time was for you. And I would say that you really had an epiphany, which was that now Jon could view physical exercise as a creative vehicle. So it was not taking away time from his main pursuit. In fact, it was facilitating it. Mm-hmm. So I think if we pull the camera lens back and look at these dynamics on a bigger picture level, I think we can say that time spent engaging in other creative genres is actually very, very important. And Jon and I started to toss around a couple of descriptive phrases that I think are very important here. One is cross-pollination, and the other is cross-training, just like an athlete, really. Engaging in other creative pursuits and physical activity enhances your performance in your main creative endeavor. It improves the quality of your work in that endeavor, and it deepens your understanding of that genre. One thing I would note that I personally believe is that it's not really necessary to be accomplished or proficient in each of those areas, just to be engaged in the process of creating in the different genres. So I'm thinking, Jon, that if you conceptualize time spent engaged in other creative pursuits as creative vehicles, I'm guessing that perhaps you'll feel less pressure to choose only one creative endeavor to focus on exclusively, because each creative pursuit enhances your performance and quality of work in all of the other creative endeavors. So they're not distractions, they're not robbing you of time for your main pursuit, because in fact everything works synergistically. And I think that you actually experience more freedom when you have multiple vehicles to choose from. Now, I think we really just began to touch on some of these ideas in our last video cast. And Jon was describing the similarities between choreographing, composing music, and writing. Mm-hmm. And he really started to discover, or I don't think it was for the first time, but it really cemented the notion that each of these different arenas really are based on the same fundamental things. Mm-hmm. One is that in all of them, Jon can conceptualize and create an underlying structure or map, so to speak. He can tell a story. He can express ideas. He can communicate emotional experience. Mm-hmm. And then you can make stylistic choices. And all of this you can do in a theatrical and musical way. So that was really a very, very big revelation, I think, that we're continuing to sort of flesh out. And I was struck, Jon, by something else you noted, which was that when you get stuck, as you say, in one medium, that you can now look to other mediums to help you sort of rethink where you're at and kind of get over that hump. And I thought that was really interesting. But ultimately, I think Jon and I came to a place where we said to ourselves that it's really all about figuring out, what do I want to do maybe even just in this moment, but what do I want to do, and what medium would be the best vehicle for me to do it? If we had to sort of break it all down to a single sentence. So, of course, I did not use a single sentence to describe all of this to you. This was truly a soliloquy. So, at this point, I want to make sure, Jon, that I turn the floor over to you, and any comments and thoughts about these very, very important ideas and revelations.
Yeah. Well, I was very fortunate in my upbringing to have a lot of different arts in my life, both in my home. My brother was singing and acting, my sister was dancing, my other sister was painting and drawing, and my mother was painting and drawing and making costumes. My father was an architect, so the arts were all around me. The school system I went through had arts and music and theater throughout it, up through high school, and I played in the band and sang in the chorus and did all sorts of things like that. And then at the end of high school, I found dance, and I found dance to be sort of, at least at that time, my favorite of the arts, and so I pursued that into a professional career. And even at that time, I sort of, at least intuitively and to some degree intellectually, knew that my background in other art forms was helping my dance. There were just certain things my directors or teachers would say. They would say, like, just be louder, do it like you're singing or something like that, and that would click for me because I had done so much singing, and it improved my dancing, and I was, and I would note other dancers who came from incredible dance backgrounds. They'd been dancing since they were 3 and gone to all these great schools. Right. Those notes, if they didn't have then a singing background, those notes from the director didn't make sense to them. And suddenly, and I just found that very interesting, that for me, I was able to tap into that aspect of dance that related to singing, as an example. So I always knew in the back of my mind that this cross-pollination was beneficial, and I wrote it for all it's worth. I brought my acting experience into my dancing, my music experience, my understanding of visual arts. I didn't study visual arts extensively, but I knew a little bit. And then throughout my career, the more I studied composition, dance composition, we also focused on the parallels between dance and music. And musical structures. My music teacher in college was phenomenal in able to teach us dancers music structure and music history and appreciation, and so much of that fed into my dancing. Sure. But I would say, since we've been talking and working together, Sherri, you're right, I definitely had sort of fallen into a headset of, dance is my focus, and I was so used to, dancing every day, of course, for years and years and years, and reaping the rich rewards of really focusing on one art form and delving deeply into it and exploring it for all I was able to. But then as my context changed, and becoming a father and moving and leaving the big dance company life, my opportunities to dance every day got smaller, which kind of seemed like a bad thing for a little while. But I realized it really just, it's not a bad thing. It just requires a perspective change. And a huge part of the perspective change is saying, well, maybe it's not that now dance is something I do less and less of, and therefore art is something I do less and less of. It's not that at all. It's dance is something I'm doing less and less of. So maybe there are opportunities to explore other art forms that I'm interested in. And it was absolutely overcoming that sort of mental hurdle a little bit, that then opened up some great new ways of thinking and looking at art, but also reminding myself of things that I used to be very passionate about, but had put on the way back burner, like in the soup kitchen down the street, back burner.
Ooh, that's far.
But it was time to maybe pick them back up again. So that's where I'm at right now, and it's been really wonderful, especially in particular rediscovering songwriting, which was one of my very first passions when I was young, but something that, again, I put aside still young, and so now rediscovering it I feel like a kid again, because I'm kind of one, it's still very new and I'm having to educate myself on a lot of aspects of it, but it's like I'm that curious about it all over again. It's wonderful.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's reminding me, when you use the term back burner a few sentences ago, and boy, that was really far back. I'm reminded about conversations that Jon and I have had for many years, conceptualizing our lives in general, not just as artists, but even in general, as thinking about different facets of our lives and our processes as components that kind of flow from front to back burner in a very, very fluid way over time, depending upon the particular context we're operating in at any point in time. So I think we're kind of coming back to that way of thinking of a fluid front and back burner type of approach. And no, we don't have to take any of the balls and place them on the shelf where they become mothballs.
Right, where they become static.
But rather, everything is in play. It just depends where and how much, and those kinds of things. But it doesn't disappear forever. And I think that since you finished Rite of Spring and the last really big RDT undertaking that you did in 2013, I think that in fact you've had this opportunity to kind of play with this concept, and slowly but surely, I think, come around to it being a situation where it's not simply a conceptual idea, but, as I observe anyway, one that is really now in your bones, or almost there.
It's in my bones until it's somewhere else.
All right, we'll take that. We'll take that. And as we can see from your description historically, that these other arenas are ones that have given you tremendous pleasure over time. And so I was hoping that you would give us an update today on your musical creations, because Jon has been enormously productive and prolific in these last couple of weeks. And I thought perhaps you can take us through the wonderful things that have been occurring.
All right. Yes, well, and let me consult we have some notes here so I can remember all the details.
Exactly.
And we're not going to play anything for you today, but but here's what's been up. In an overview, I've been dabbling with composing music mostly through electronic means on my computer. Again, that's the context I have. If I'm not going to schedule dancers to get together and make a big show, I'm not scheduling musicians either to work with. So it's very much, what can I do in the time that I have while my kids are settled or away somewhere for a couple hours? What can I do that still feels fulfilling, and I can sit down with my computer and I can play with some programs and work on some music. So I don't remember when I first started the electronic piece, the classical piece. I'm working on a suite of about 6 sections of what I would call a classical piece of music, classical with a small c. So it's in a classical style. It's instrumental music. But that was probably, when did we do the promo video and we needed music for it? And
oh gosh, now I'm forgetting. We've done so many different ventures.
Yes. But was that the beginning of this year, or was that already last year?
I'm not sure.
Okay, we're gonna have to check
He
the log.
stumped me on this.
But anywhere from like 6 months to a year ago, we'll get back to you on that one.
Okay.
I started dabbling around with this idea, and it's in that time it grew from a 3-minute piece of music to about a 7 or 8 piece of music, to then 3 or 4 movements, to now 5 and 6 movements. So it's become this big, hopefully, I think, beautiful piece of music that you can enjoy in movements, or you can enjoy the whole with an arc all the way through. And as I sort of discovered that was working, suddenly then my little devilish child peeked up and said, well, could you write a song in this fashion? Again, in the wee hours of the night, or when the kids are napping. And the answer was yes, I could. And a while ago, I tried the first experiment, and it started out with experiments. It really started out with, I have a few files of experiments, and they really just were, how do I mesh these sounds together? Can I really create a song structure in this way? And those experiments were good enough that I then was able to pick my favorite and flesh it out into a complete song with verses, chorus, melody, lyrics. And then the bravery it took, and again, thank you to my wife, because I had mentioned that I was kind of hobby toying around with this, and she's like, oh well, and I was like, and I might need a microphone to just kind of play around with what recording vocals would be like. And I think whatever birthday, Christmas, whatever came up next, she got me one. So there I am in my basement, kind of like this, a room very much like this, and the kids are asleep upstairs, and I've got my computer and my microphone, and I'm hunched over trying to sing these songs. And my goal was just to get the notes out and the lyrics out, so it's a record of what I want. If it sounds like a terrible tape recording from the 80s, fine. That just is what it is. But I just wanted the song to exist. So there, I did one, and I put it down for a while, I think because Second Story maybe picked up momentum again, and we were doing showings and things like that. But now, as Sherri described, summer's here. I have both kids in camp for the first time, and I actually have a few hours to dedicate to something. And that something, I decided, would be to record more songs, get them more songs fleshed out, and actually have a little collection of about 6 songs. Yeah. Which I have now done. Now, in doing that, actually, I had about 5 up until recently, and it's funny because, again, just talking about little process tools. Again, at one point, I knew I had these scraps of songs together, and it just occurred to me. I was like, what would a demo album be for me? Like, what would that be like? Like, that's how singer-songwriters get started and they get their stuff out there. So I just picked up my phone and opened up my little notes, and I just wrote my amazing demo album, and like as if that's a title of anything. But I
Sounds
just started
perfect to me.
writing down what tracks I had going and was working on, and I kind of just looked at them and I was like, oh yeah, that's a nice assortment. And I was like, you know what, I think I need a 6th to kind of round it out, and it should be more of this style to complement the others, but to also add some new interest. And those 6 songs together, if I can complete them the way I want, they would kind of feel like a complete entity. Okay, so what do I do to go for it? And that's what I've been doing the past few weeks. There was one night, at this point I knew I picked a lot of sounds and loops and little tracks for that 6th song, and I just threw them all together into one song file, and they all kind of sounded really beautiful, like a big mash of sound and music together. There was no structure, but it just was this great sort of landscape of music, and it was very shimmery. And I said, this song will be called "The Ray, the Cloud, and the Shimmer," and that's where sort of the title came from. And I was like, now I need to mess around with this and create a song structure for it. So I knew I wanted to do that, and I knew I wanted to get preliminary vocals similar to the vocals of that first song I described, all recorded as in whatever ramshackled fashion I could do it. So one night, my wife was putting the kids to bed, and she's like, you can go out. Why don't you go out and have some time to yourself? Do you know what you want to do? And I was like, I have no idea. I'm just going to grab my computer and get out of here and work on something. So I did. I grabbed the microphone, headphones, and my computer, and I just got in the car and I just drove. And I found the quietest parking lot I could think of. And I sat in my car, and as soon as I turned off the engine, I was like, it's 90 degrees in the middle of summer. What am I going to do for like 2 hours in the middle of the night in my hot car? But sure enough, I was like, I don't care. I was a kid again, and I just wanted to do that. I was like, this is just what I want to be doing right now. So I opened up the computer, and I rolled down the windows so I had a nice breeze blowing, and I just got everything ready and checked things and blah, 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 and plugged everything in. And then I was like, okay, here we go. And the windows go up. I start singing, blah, 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 whatever. And then I hit stop. I'm sweating. Windows down. Okay, and now I can like work again and move things around and listen to what I just done and be like, oh no, I need to fix that. Okay, here we go. Windows up. Sweating. Stop. Windows down again. Breeze blows in. I feel like I'm in heaven. And it was 2 of the most fun hours I think I've had in recent memory. It was just so exciting. It was like being on a roller coaster. It was so impromptu and strange and DIY, but it was totally just something I have been dying to do forever.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And then in a few follow-up processes like that, I was able to get the preliminary vocals of 5 of the tracks done, and I still had a 6th to go, right?
Right.
And I got the song structure of the 6th, and I had set a goal for myself now with my daughter being in her last week of camp. My son still has a few more going, but I said, okay, this is her last week of camp. It's the last week of me having sort of chunks of time like this. So what do I want to... I didn't have to set a goal for myself, but I really, it just felt like I wanted to. So I said, you know what, by the end of this week, I need that 6th track down so I can say I at least have a rough version of all 6 songs. And my amazing demo album will be complete-ish. And with that sort of headspace very clear, I finished a day or two early, I think, and I had even one or two, I wound up only having one more session to kind of comb through and tweak some things. But it was kind of this remarkable rush of creation, and it was so fun. I'm still riding high on that, and I'm still tweaking it and working it. And
absolutely. I mean, what an amazing milestone if you think about what it included: song structure, lyrics, melodies, virtually every aspect, a component involved in creating a song, and you did it for all 6 songs for an entire album. And I can tell you that when Jonathan finished the last one and he got in touch with me, and even though he was texting, I knew he was elated, that it was a very, very pivotal moment. And I was wondering, Jon, in this process, if you could share with our colleagues a bit of what you began to describe to me as one particular aspect of this process that you experienced, through which you experienced tremendous development as a musician and as a creator.
Yes. I think, song structure and elements of music that, there's all these sort of different categories and ways to think about aspects of it. But one particular aspect I had to really focus on was what is sort of the style of these songs and what is the character of each song. And that particularly came about as I was trying to record these vocals, because suddenly, when you're, at least when I'm putting the samples and the loops together and things like that, I can tweak them and change them and edit them, but ultimately there's sort of a finite amount that I can do with them. With vocals, it's like, I mean, yes, I'm limited by my own voice box and my own range, but gosh, there's so many ways I can go about delivering these vocals. Where do I begin? And this is certainly an area I'm a novice in. To a good degree, but I learned a lot about it just by trying it and trying things out and determining for myself what I truly believed sounded good and sounded right for the songs. So some of them, to give you just some examples, some of them clearly are very edgy, angry, rock and roll, sort of very industrial songs, and that's kind of my favorite genre of music. If I had to pick one, I really love all genres of music. But and I did not know I had it in me to deliver vocals that way. I sang in a chorus when I was younger and things like that, and I loved musical theater, and I did a lot of musical theater in school and stuff. So to like growl and grit and scream my way through a song was totally, I love hearing other people do it. I didn't know I had it in me until I sat down and tried it. Turns out I think I'm okay at it. But then really addressing the softer songs and the songs that were more delicate, I assumed I would need a more delicate vocal delivery. And so I'm trying them out, but and they're sounding fine, but I don't know, they just weren't coming across the right way. And and they sounded so different from the other songs, and I was like, gosh, is this the same person? Is this the same album? Is this the same artist? And one could say yes, because certainly artists can put out a huge range of styles, but what was most important is that I didn't like what I was hearing yet. Like I was like, I'm still not happy with this, and sure, I can go in a very different direction from the other songs, but it's not sounding right. And then I tried some of these lighter vocal deliveries, but with a little bit of the anger and the edge from the other songs, and suddenly it all clicked. And I realized, I was like, oh, even the softer side of this project still has some of that anger and edge in it. And I didn't know that about myself. I'm like, I guess I'm kind of an angry, edgy guy, or at least right now in this period, sure.
Okay.
But it's also what was right for the songs, and suddenly they all started. Now they sound cohesive together, truly, and but I think the most interesting aspect is, like, I kind of learned that about myself.
Yourself, yeah. Well, what it really struck me when you talked about cohesion to me, and you mentioned 3 areas that came together for you. So you felt you had a coherent sound, you had a coherent identity for the first time, and a coherent style. So this was really remarkable, from your tinkering to something that became you.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's what I was saying about, I learned that about myself. And again, it's that, oh, this is my identity as a singer-songwriter, and this is my style as a singer-songwriter.
Right.
And it's just so interesting to think that I didn't plan it that way.
Right.
It's what
Right.
came out organically.
Yes.
And it's what evolved the more I tried to make these songs really sound true to my ear.
Exactly.
And once all the songs sounded right to my ear, that's when I realized, oh, and now they have a cohesiveness to them. And that must be my style and my identity. Again, at least for this project, at least for where I'm at right now. Isn't that, I think that's so cool.
It is. It's
what
really
an amazing way to learn that about yourself and about a work. To really just push it until you are satisfied. And then it all comes together.
Well, I think, John, that this is absolutely a perfect example of process, where you really had to give yourself the time and the space to experiment in order to deepen your technical and artistic competencies in this particular area. But perhaps equally as important, or more important, would be the space and time to allow your own idiosyncratic style and identity to emerge, using the word you used just before, organically. So here, in my view, is really absolutely the definition of process.
Yeah. And to approach the same problem, a problem being a good thing, like a challenge, like something to be figured out, from many, many angles, from many sides. And I mean, you could keep going at it from this one angle, and it's not until you let me try it from all these different angles that you suddenly really understand and get everything chiseled away the way you want it. So it's a 3-dimensional, beautiful object. Yeah.
And maybe that even relates back to where we began conceptually in our videocast today, about looking at the different artistic genres synergistically, and that perhaps by engaging in this particular genre and that particular endeavor, you wind up having an experience similar to what you just described, where you're approaching what you're doing from multiple angles. And you're just bringing so many different perspectives and ways of operating into it, and you're experimenting until what starts emerging feels really right to you. So, and maybe it is important, once again, going back to our cross-pollination and cross-training, that you're bringing into the process all of these different elements. You're bringing a lot to bear upon your process so that you can get to what is truly authentic. And it sounds as if you have. So far, so good, anyway. And one of the things that struck me today about your descriptions, Jon, of your music creation is your reference to feeling like a kid. And you've talked about feeling like a kid when you can play with the latest technologies for music creation. You've talked about it when you think about your writing and you say, hey, I can write anything I want to in any way I wish. And I just feel like a kid. And it brings me to the question, what does feeling like a kid really mean for you? What's the significance of this?
I think one of the biggest words would be freedom. Feeling uninhibited. Curious. I think we mentioned that word earlier. In so many other aspects of my life, I feel seasoned and mature and and confused. But to really feel curious about something again to this degree is so exciting and reminds me of being a kid. There's a playfulness, especially in these mediums that are, one could say new to me. Again, I've been dabbling in them my whole life, but really focusing on them newly. There's a lot of rules that I don't have for myself because I'm not dealing with, in dance I have a whole career behind me, and sure, anytime I could branch out and try something else, but in many ways I'm often, referencing what I have done and moving those ideas forward. But with, as a musician, hey, I'm brand new. As a writer, in many ways, I'm brand new. So I'm still kind of figuring out my identity and my style. So
you're just
there's
starting
play,
out.
there's and there's, gosh, I need to teach myself how to do X, Y, and Z because I've never done that before, so there's a lot of new education
Absolutely.
happening.
And might you essentially, like a kid, be feeling like, and you referred to this just sort of a little bit, but there are no preconceived ideas and there is no sense of limits at all.
And no pressure.
And no pressure.
Nobody's pressuring me to do these projects.
Right.
And again, I don't have a reputation to live up to with these projects. It's just my own curiosity going forward.
And you can call your own shots.
Yeah.
In whatever way you want. That's what I loved when you spoke about the writing part of it. It's like, I can do whatever I want when I want to. And isn't that something we really, if we are honest,
Yeah.
all really feel and wish we could do, and like almost like that,
You at least
toddler,
need a couple hours a day or a week at least where you can just do whatever you want to do.
Yeah, in the way that you want to.
In the way that you want to
do. No judgment, no preconceived ideas, nobody breathing down your neck.
And just,
How soon
and
can
just
we
make
get
something.
to this place? I don't know.
Abracadabra.
Oh my gosh.
Ping.
Well, we'll have to keep you informed as we continue to see how these feelings evolve over time, and if they do start to change, I wonder if you start pursuing these things very seriously, let's say, from a professional standpoint. Let's see if you help us remember
As soon
this.
as anything becomes your job, watch out.
Right. I was going to say, remind us, please, to ask Jon what happened to the kid. So
Bring back the kid. Yeah.
I think this will be interesting to see. And I wonder if we can keep this conscious. And by keeping it conscious, you might be able to hold
I need
on
a tattoo.
to it.
I need to put a tattoo.
Kid.
Or like on
Kid
my
over
forehead.
here.
Kid.
But now to wrap up, of course, we're coming to the cliffhanger, the Albany Berkshire Ballet.
Yes, I'm making a piece. Yes.
What
has
happened and what is about to occur? Well, where we last left off in our last video cast, Jon was scheduled to have his third and final rehearsal on July 15th, in which he was to create the entire rest of the Verdant Fire duet. He was to teach the quartet to a couple of folks who didn't know it and rehearse it with the others who had danced it a couple times before, and have all of it in good shape to present August 16th. Ha ha. As if that's barely possible anyway.
Like that.
Like
no
that.
problem. Yeah.
But then, what happens? Jon gets a call the night before the 15th from Lisa McBride, who informs him that she is
Sorry, Lisa.
ill.
Yeah.
Sorry, Lisa, but man, had to cancel the rehearsal. Uh-oh. Now what? Well, still can be salvaged, apparently, because Jon can rehearse on August 5th if the other dancers are available to rehearse with him. And with a little icing on the cake here, Jon is scheduled to be at ABB conducting a summer intensive for them the mornings of August 6th and 7th. So maybe if you get super lucky, you can use the afternoons of the 6th and 7th to do a little more rehearsal. And again, that's if the dancers are available.
Wow.
Am I right?
And as it turns out, it's all fine. It's all going to be fine.
It's all going to be fine, but
The rehearsals are happening, and there are more rehearsals happening without me. So the piece is going to be in shape. I still have to finish my choreography, but we have the dates down, and it's all going to be fine. And the dancers will look great. And love you guys.
and there it is. So, ladies and gentlemen, stick around for our next video cast to find out how, in fact, all of this shakes out with ABB, and to see the latest and greatest developments with Jon's creative endeavors in his music, and who knows, maybe he'll pick up his writing in the next week or not. But
it's a plan.
It's a plan, or he might delve into something else entirely.
I need to teach myself music mixing.
Yes. Sound
'Cause,
editing, music mixing.
Because it doesn't take years of training and practice.
Really, just the week before the
Just,
next
you know.
video cast, so we can share it, right? That's about it. So, lots on the agenda, lots on our plates, lots to share with you, and as always, we thank you for joining us tonight, and look forward to continuing the process with you next week. Have a good night.